Hey everyone, this is Adam Davis here from thepositivepath.info, and we have an exclusive interview today with Michael Tsarion. Michael is here for his Australian tour, the Age of Manipulation tour, and he's been here the last 2 weeks. We've already done the Sydney and Melbourne and Gold Coast events, and we're about to head off to Perth to do the Perth event as well. As you can probably hear, we're out in nature. We're here at the Haven Healing Lodge, owned by Paul Chambers, a fantastic friend of mine who's really living his truth. And I think we're all really enjoying it. I hope you enjoy this particular interview. It might be a bit noisy with the cicadas and the birds, but at the end of the day, we'd rather be out here in nature than stuck in a house. So, hope you enjoy the interview, and we're going to get started now. Michael, it's a pleasure to be here. Hope you enjoy it.
Yes, I am.
Have you enjoyed the last couple of days?
Absolutely. It's been on the go, but it's very exciting to meet new people and to present the information. Actually, this information has only been presented here in Australia, for one. But even if it was earlier material that I've done, it would still be interesting to see the reactions of different crowd, different place, different background. But it's, as I say, extra fascinating and interesting because it is new information and you have no clue how it's going to go across. And then to see very positive responses is excellent. So it's been really good.
If you were to take someone off the street who asked you, what is it that you do at these events, how would you explain it?
Well, I think I have on my YouTube account, I'm not sure, on the channel, interests, and partly tongue-in-cheek, but partly also very seriously. I wrote Fighting Tyranny, and the work goes into that. I come from a long tradition of studying the architecture of control, both on a political level, and then my work start going more into how that type of tyranny affects human consciousness. And basically, since I started publicly, I've wanted to get to the information that we're getting to now, and only had time to put in, almost anecdotally, this other thing about the consciousness and bringing in a little bit more psychology, a little bit more philosophy, to show how the oligarchs, the rulers, I'm not doubting that they use a divide and rule policy when it comes to control, but people often mistake that as being a divide and rule policy only in forms of territory or mass movements. They sometimes forget and have to be reminded, almost constantly reminded, that this is also a policy, a strategy that involves human consciousness, the individual and their consciousness. So basically it's a discussion of that. Inevitably, to talk about the human mind, you have to get into psychology and philosophy, whether you like it or not, in a way. And for some people that's going to be over their heads and a little bit maybe intellectual or whatever you may call it, because it's not in their background to think in that way. It's easier to see something sort of in newsprint or on the television or topically. Something you can chat on an everyday level with, like say the recessions and the wars and the genocides and the vaccines. But see, I think that other teachers in this field are doing a marvelous job exposing that. They really are, and there's really almost nothing to add. And if there is something to add, it's kind of minor in a way. So my forte is to really look at the attack on the individual. This is what fascinates me personally. This is what really started my whole career in this movement, and I've been studying it ever since. So to be able to then come up with insights, you want to be able to turn those around in real time and publish them and get them out, disseminated, rather than wait 10 years before people are ready and so on. So when you ask me how good I feel about it, it is mostly positive because the turnaround time is so little. In past ages, when somebody had something incredible to tell the world, something of absolute importance, something of crucial importance to their lives, first of all, the mainstream media weren't interested. And if you tried to disseminate it yourself, you may have to wait years and years and years before you could do so. And then you sit back and wait for the response, if any. Now, you see, just to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people come to events of their own free will, and most of them are up to speed with what you're talking about, is fantastic.
I think the revolution will not be televised, but it might end up on YouTube. We're seeing a lot of people who I think are becoming increasingly aware of what's happening, and they're becoming they're not afraid to get out there and actually shoot their own information and get out there. And I think a lot of your information, especially with myself and others that I know, have found you via the internet. How do you feel about the internet? What role does that play within all this?
It can't be underestimated at all, because remember, even as good as a hall is, hundreds, thousands of people may come. We've historically seen this. You put something up like Origins of Evil or 2012, The Future of Mankind, I think I did that talk in front of 60 people in Los Angeles when it first came. It was sort of impromptu. They invited me quickly. In fact, I didn't even know it was going to be filmed. I walk in there and there's Ted from Booktree, a pal, you know, who lives in LA, says, "Oh, just toddle along here, and I think I'll film it for you." And hands you a CD. You put it up on the internet, and within 8 months or something, like over 1 million people had seen it. Before YouTube messed with the figures and pretend that, you know, take the countdown and starts at 1 again. But I kept track of it, and I'm sure that by the second year, and then Architects of Control as well, that went up, and over 2 million people had seen it within a year. Again, it was about 800,000 within a month. So of course, how can how could you fill a hall with 800,000 people? You know, nobody could do that, not even Elvis, right? So that is the benefit of. I remember we mentioned that in the introduction of the talk as well, that we are in an age of answers. Something is, even as much as you can feel fatalistic and pessimistic about our times, it can never be lost sight of that the information that is being shared, being discovered, is quite in its own way unique. And most importantly, the form of dissemination of that knowledge is unique with the electronica.
So if the internet is, you know, our greatest tool at the moment, and the internet has been created, say, by the army, are we seeing, is there some sort of, is there a duality happening here where we've actually got these tools that are more like catalysts, and where we choose what we choose to do with them is up to us? Is that what we're seeing?
Yes, we see all down through life. In fact, through military action, through war, some of the most important things that have benefited human beings, including roads, look at the Romans, right? Medicines, the list goes on of the things that have been invented by scientists while they were actually preparing for a state of war. And then there's side effects to this. But the thing is that, say even if somebody was to sit here and argue with me that the internet was created by Big Brother, you know, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but Big Brother is not absolutely certain how the people that they consider slaves are going to end up using that. They really don't know. And of course, if you do look at the internet, there is a lot of rubbish up there. You know, you could say a vast majority of it is just total, you know, inane nonsense. That's what they were probably hoping for 100%, given their very dour opinion of the human race. But then, to their horror, they find out that those few people who still have independent minds and who won't be stamped and numbered and are very creative in their own way, and questioning, also put out material. Now, even if that was as little as 7%, it's still a shock, you know, given the waves of control that are coming through the television, the processed foods, and the sort of ubiquitous mind control that happens from school on, where almost everyone you meet thinks you're crazy if you even mention anything, let alone UFOs and things like that. So I think they could create something. They did it for the intellectuals. It was firstly the universities that used the internet primarily to share information, very important thing anyway. Even if it was just for that, it would have been very valuable. But then when it became the vendors, you see the vendors who have they're not controlled by anybody, they just want to make a buck. In a way, they said, oh, customers will like it if this happened and that happened. And sooner or later, the market starts to dictate. You know, I'll use a lot of quotes from Ayn Rand, and the one I don't use, which I probably should use, is her comment about the fact that just as sort of the West opened with the division of religion and state, you know, state and religion, state and church parted, she went on to say that the future depends on the separation between big government, or any government, and economics. And if you think of what I've just said about the role of the vendor back in early 80s, and how they say, well, our customers want, you know, easier this and easier access, and they can't read this and they can't read that, and suddenly the Microsofts go, well, if we want to stay in business and not lose out to competition. So even on a street level, the market sort of takes over and has its own momentum, whereas Big Brother's agenda may have to accommodate those kinds of things. But that's never to say that Big Brother doesn't have a major hand in what's going on, but at the same time, there are the vagaries of the flow of what people want. Otherwise they can go, yeah, I'm not interested in that. Look how quickly video games and other things get redundant. So it's quick.
Totally right. Yeah. And you know, with Edward Bernays, who I know you know his work, what he did very well, you know, the father of PR, are we starting to see where the market is basically manipulated to want certain things at the same time?
More and more of that's happening, of course. Say if we talked, say, 20 years ago, they might be slightly different, or they were more inept at doing it and so on. But now, unfortunately, because of since the Reagan and Bush era, the whole
me.
Well, also the homogenization, putting their own family in power, you know, homogenizing the networks, casting out any outsiders. It's actually been quite rapid. So within about 10-15 years, this has now become a problem where they're monopolizing all the media outlets vastly. pretending like they're not, but then you go into the middle of Europe and you find that there's clear channel billboards in the middle of Europe. Everyone in America knows it's a problem, but you go in the middle of Europe and some countries there, and you see that they own the billboards there as well. So it's one big, gigantic, centralized network, which is the big danger. That danger's been predicted by savants from within the system and from without. And that needs to stop. Otherwise, there will be finally a major crackdown, and they will control completely what people think they want independently, whereas in fact they've been programmed to want it.
With the control of consciousness, someone said to you, "How is my consciousness being controlled?" I know that there's literally probably 1,000 different facets, but what are the main overarching structures that you can see?
First of all, it is through the anxiety that we talked about. One could say fear loosely, if you wanted to use that term, although psychologically speaking, fear is a legitimate fear. Oh my God, that croc's after me or something, or something's going to fall on your head. That's fear. That's more towards a rational, bona fide threat to your life. Anxiety is a mood, a state of discontent that arises from within when your inner house, your inner temple is not in balance. And we described it as a way of seeing is blurred, fractured, or in some way tweaked. The most extreme version of that, of course, is neurosis and so on, all the derangements, right? But long before you even become diagnosed as anything like that, most people are living in a state of angst, a state of sort of topical anxiety. And Big Brother knows exactly why that is. In fact, remember the introduction goes into emphasizing that their whole barrage of three-headed monsters and financial meltdowns and wars and rumors of wars, all of that stuff, is them trying to exacerbate that fact. They already know that you have a baseline of sort of anxiety, some more, some less in different people. But then in recent times, and actually down through the years, they've tried to exacerbate that by constantly pulling the rug from under people, threatening their survival needs, food, shelter, and so on. And the working on anxiety is one of the, as they say, there's many, right? But that's one door into the complete control of the human being.
And that's what we're moving into with the transhuman agenda, as you put it.
Yeah, they couldn't believe their luck. This works so well that suddenly they started thinking, oh, well, where can we go with this then? Since whole mass, if you're a single sheepdog, like David Icke has often used the metaphor of the sheepdog, and there's the farmer just leaning on his staff going, this is good. I'd be running around hunting every single individual sheep. Well, if you suddenly realize that with one crack of the whip, you can, corral a huge herd of steer, you start thinking in terms of what more can you do. Your power goes to your head. So as a matter of fact, when they start seeing that people can easily be goaded based on manipulating their psychology, then they started realizing that maybe then their global visions, which was only some pipe dreams of some very obscure, completely almost insane ideologues, right? Now they started thinking, oh, maybe we could implement this. And so it's now the World Federation of this and the global that, and now it's a huge thing since 1985 or something like that. It's been pushed with unbelievable fervor, this whole globalistic agenda that really was only the pipe dream of a few very obscure and very creepy sort of ideologues, So yeah, they've realized that they really do have the reins on most people, and it's tight, and that perhaps can now further their agenda to work into this global village in which the person who's now so sedated because their anxiety is so strong, in order to sedate it, they take the pills and whatever, become sort of like Foucault said, docile bodies, and that kind of creature is then easily to corral into the global village. The free man, well, that's a whole other subject. The person who still resists. You
call this the age of manipulation. That drums up in me a feeling of that this is actually part of the overall process of the way, I guess, consciousness works. What's your thoughts on that in terms of this being the age of manipulation? Is this something that we had to go through?
Yes, it is, because every time, remember the quote from Shelley and the quote from Rand and others, as long as there's government in the world, there'll always be tyranny. There was that quote from the French poet, tyranny is always better organized than freedom, right? So there's a certain kind of person who's very weak in their mind, these docile bodies, who require that kind of order. They require those handrails. And government is a manifestation of the Big Father presence. We even spoke in the talk about how young freedom actually is, even purely on a political, sociological level. Freedom is about 5 minutes old in life. medieval man didn't know it, didn't have it, didn't even expect to have it. Oh, he had kings on the left and kings on the right, you know. So telling him what to do, and then rewarding him for his blind obedience. Even in the Bible, the so-called holy people of God, the Israelites, are telling you all we had to do was be obedient. God just said, obey us, and we did it so well that now we're the chosen ones. Isn't it great? Well, you didn't have to make any sandals, you didn't have to dig any wells, you didn't have to cultivate any fields, you didn't have to build any great cities or write any great scriptures. No, you just had to be obedient to Big Daddy, and everything was, laid on. Well, we have not moved. My work is to show that we haven't really moved psychologically.
From that need to have Big Brother.
From that state. So even though there's a few people who have moved on, the mass of mankind is still going, where's the next one? Religion's kind of not happening, so where's the next
leader?
Where's the next leader? Hail the providers.
Abomination.
Yeah. So from Rome, from Greece, from Babylon, the British Empire, the Venetians, whatever you want to call it. Now you have basically imperialism with a smile in America. Only the smile is getting more turning to a grimace. But it used to be with a smile. So it's imperialism all the way down the line, and but my message again is don't just think that imperialism is purely a jackboot situation of gun to the head. It is infinitely more subtle. In fact, their major weapons are focused on the psyche of man, not so much on his person and the society. Because as we said, they've actually got that nailed already. It's this thing, it's how people see, it's their subconscious that is the real, put yourself in their position. The remote control character becomes a bore after a while. Isn't it? You can send them to die, you can send them to plagues, that's kind of uninteresting now. You're wanting to get real control. All psychopaths want real control over the mind. That turns them on. The sicker they are, the more they want to mess with your mind. They want to mess with the psychology of a person. That's what the sickest people on earth are about, and these people at the top of the pyramid are no different. They're interested in controlling consciousness and always have been. Or they've been tutored by people who always have been, you see.
When we say they, is that a... How would you explain who they is? Because I know you go into a lot of the Luciferian connections to a lot of this.
Yeah, ultimately I call them Atonists. It's almost the same thing as
from Egypt.
Yeah, solar worshippers, and the people that control the world today are ideologically or biologically related to them. And you can see this in the symbolism that they use. Barack Obama, not only the name Barack Obama, we can get into the etymology of that, it's unbelievable. Barack actually means Satan, by the way. But the symbolism and the logos that they're using are directly Atonist. Almost patently. And this goes for lots of other symbols, the Nazis and what have you. So these characters are obsessed, they're maniacal, and they really are afraid in a way. They have fear. But the groups that you're talking about are the Alpha Lodges of Freemasonry, largely controlled from British Isles. Sad to have to say it, but you could just take a walk of Sydney streets and take photographs of the names of the royal streets and all the rest of the symbolism, and to prove what I'm talking about here, and that is Canada, Australia and America are basically vassal states of the British Crown. And behind the British Crown is something more elusive. Those are the Alpha Lodges of Freemason. We have the names, I've mentioned them in my work, and I also have references to other scholars far, far more research than I am in that particular subject. So I've got lots of names there, and if anybody wants even more, they can email me and I'll give them more work than they'd ever want to see in one lifetime to research these organizations. Some of them are very ancient people. The dynasties have come from the Ottoman Empire. Dynasties have come specifically from the Habsburgs. It's the Habsburg Hanoverian, line, and Plantagenets, Savoys. All of these people are still ensconced in power. Some are topically Catholic, so they appear on paper to be siding with the Vatican, and others are technically, again, Protestant, appearing to have other allegiances, you see. But those allegiances are purely a smokescreen. Beneath the surface, behind the lodge door, these people are one, and their symbolism shows you that they're one. So we have their names, you can track their families, we know where they live, and so on. We know what they've been doing. And it's important to know the middlemen, they don't often operate openly. They always hide behind a charity like Prince Charles is wont to do. All this goody two-shoes rubbish. But the thing is that then they work through individuals, the Bonos, the Geldofs, and the Brzezinskis, and the Colonel Mandel houses are agents, J.P. Morgan, and so on. Then you have institutions. The individual was once, the cigar-smoking individual, with his shady mafioso dealings with the black Venetians or whatever. That's kind of scaled back now, because average investigative journalists can see through that. Who the hell are you? What the hell is this? With your harem or whatever it is. It's too obvious. So what they do now is they work through corporations, crown corporations, big, sterile, faceless corporations that appear to be all about money and greed. What rubbish. And any conspiracy researcher who thinks that that's all it is sorely misguided. Right? Corp is dead, a dead thing. It's just a vehicle for something else more elusive. Look at the symbolism of the corporations. Look at the designs of the buildings. Go inside. Look at the mosaics. And then again, do the homework and track back. Who creates these financial meltdowns and why? A financial meltdown run by a few lower-level psychopaths on Wall Street is only another action to destabilize people, to make you think, to destabilize you ultimately spiritually, so that you believe that somebody else has your financial and spiritual welfare in their hands. If they can do that, if they can just do that, and when they've done it continually down through the centuries. And it's time people woke up and realized, that we, first of all, financially, economically can take our power back overnight, very easily. You just tear up their little pieces of paper and throw them away, and don't go down and sign on for all of that rubbish, right? And secondly, you can spiritually attune yourself. And this is, when I say spiritual, it doesn't mean what religion you are. Spiritually, you can attune yourself to say, I don't give the right to anyone, not any human being, nor anything, nor any goblin or ghost, to say that you control the reason for which I've been born on this planet and my prosperity. It's in my hands and my hands only, and I will decide. And if I act on my own free will and I fail, well, then I've taken responsibility for that. And if I succeed, I accept the glory of that. But no one else will decide my fate. That's what the world now needs to do, wake up, and that's what this series and talk is really about. And we break it down, because it's a huge subject. We're just talking an overview. We break it down into all its subsets and show how the tyranny works so that we can then peel it away. Here's how it works in this area. Here's how it works here. Here's how it works here. Different in some cases, same in others. And so now you know what it is. Now you can get rid of it. Diagnosis followed by healing.
And you talk about this really only being for it's not for the 7 billion people to wake up to this information at this particular time. Do you still believe that? And is that what we're seeing at the moment?
I'd say my work. I wouldn't talk about anybody else. I think other people's work is fantastically topical. I'd be amazed why you couldn't be inspired by it. If you listen to Alex or David, I would. Why would you not want to get up and say, this is it. This changed my life. As many of the people we're meeting here has happened. I do reserve my work because I'm not a fool. I know that this rubs people up the wrong way a lot of the time. It's very intense.
It's very internal.
It's internal, isn't it? Yeah, so it's going a little bit more to the raw nerve. We spoke earlier and said that this was an advanced class in a way, and it is. And the next ones will even be more so. But then
a lot of people wouldn't appreciate the mirrors, I think. You put it back on themselves of self-responsibility.
And yet I'm not at the same time. I mean, remember we were congratulating people for having come this far.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the fact that the world would be a better place if we didn't have these parasites and so on. But at the same time, you do need to bring it very personal home so people feel urgent about what's going on. A lot of times the other speakers tend to pacify people, give them a couple of cushions, and it feels all nice and cushy and rosy. But the world is in a state of absolute meltdown. People are suffering all over the world. And the blinkers need to be taken away. We need to do something. And remember they said that, what's that line? The more you know, the more you need, the more your responsibility you have to change things. So you can't cut it up small in that way. That can be done by other people. And secondly, I think that I personally don't like talking down to people. I think they are intelligent. Look at the responses we have from the people who come over and go, and you don't even have to say they got it. It's right on their face. There's a luminous look. It's just partly confirmed things I've already known and partly added new dimension. That's what it's all about. And as I said, you put it on the internet and it hits millions of other people. So don't talk down to people, and also love the knowledge enough not to cut it up so small that you're doing almost an injustice to the very knowledge itself. Because remember, Michael Tsarion isn't telling anybody anything. The knowledge is awakening me. The knowledge is awakening everybody else. It's the knowledge that we bow before, not the individual. Right? And so I have that very reverent attitude towards the knowledge itself and refuse to cut it up and make it spin a rack for people, because I don't think that is that's what's been done in the past, and I don't think it is respectful to the knowledge itself.
And that's why you focus on the quotes of the different people throughout the ages who have explained this.
Yes, right from Cicero and Marcus Aurelius. These predicaments that face us today are the same predicaments that faced the Taoists thousands of years ago.
Did you ever think you'd be doing this as a I was going to say a living, but I guess as a journey?
No. I had resisted for years. In fact, the vast majority of the work I've done up until today has been stuff that I've been dealing with since 1983 as a personal hobby, and got much stronger on it, say in the early 90s. So there was never a thought for a single moment until I met Jordan Maxwell and others who just wouldn't stop pushing me to do talks, and Victoria Jack and a few other people in America. I literally made it almost impossible to say no. Robert Perala and others, and I was very, apprehensive about it. And I had made a personal decision several times through life, because I grew up in a New Age environment, and I was exposed to some very, very, great teachers and what have you, and saw that whole milieu almost from its opening, almost from its inception. And I was young, but young people see a lot. And I didn't really care to follow in their footsteps, even with the people that I thought were brilliant, were very positive. It just didn't seem my cup of tea. I like to sit home and study it on my own and, stare at the window and not really have any of that notoriety, let's say. 20, 30 years later, people who predicted that you're going to be doing this, suddenly it comes true, and it's not will at all, anything but. It was circumstances and then other people very much putting me there, and then one thing leads to another, and then I'm a bit of a workhorse. When you put the first book out or the first little talk out, and you see a good response, I automatically want to make it better, just to finish the product, just to say, okay, there's mistakes, corrections, put a better cover on the thing, for God's sake, get rid of that spiral bound thing.
Yeah.
So I just, as a workman, I don't know, or an artisan, I am focused on that, making that thing that they admire just that much better. No other, forecast of, this will take me here or this. It was just a warm reception of a young guy from outside. All of these people welcomed me in, set up extra talks on my behalf, wanted to know more about what I was doing. And then me just hoping to come in and say, here's the same thing, or here's another product, and it's better, It's craftsmanship. That's basically my thread, right up to today. Months and months and months was spent just putting this slideshow together at the exclusion of everything else. Almost whole other aspects of my life, both, financial earning and personal life, get immediately put on hold to work on the Australian tour. So that's craftsmanship again. You just go, let me want to rehash, just get up there and wing it. No, this is a very vital time. I try to stay coherent and bring the best of the knowledge that I can and put it together. And just put out a really strong product that was really going to make people think very deeply, and not do a second shoddy thing, to reciprocate for that warm response that I got in the middle. After that initial launch, it's just been the support then of the public that kept you going.
Yeah.
We want this, so tell us about that, and then you just keep going. Or again, I see errors in a lot of other areas and go, that gets my goat. And you go, no, I want to fix that. So a great deal of my work is refutation, built out of the X factors of other people's work where they're not quite, on the ball or whatever.
And your inert need inside to want to get it perfect.
Mostly that.
Yeah.
Mostly that. You can't be responsible for, you can't live in expectation of what people are going to think and whether they're going to like it and all. The guy who hates it today loves it tomorrow. A little bit of shake up in life and they'll all be going, man, you were really right. Yeah, well, you didn't say that at the time. So that, it doesn't matter. Time, when the truth is out there, leave it. Let it go. It's not yours anyway. I'm just broadcasting what I've learned, and I take it as the truth. I feel very strong about it. But then you let it go, and you release it, and you let it take its own actions, perfectly capable of doing its own thing in the minds of everybody else without you getting in there and rehardwiring them. Just let it go. Don't own it. Don't copyright it. Don't patent it in that way.
It was interesting. Before the Melbourne event, when we checked into our hotel, your solution slide, there's 5 parts to your talk, and the solutions part was completely destroyed.
Corrupted, yeah. That was like 9 hours before we have to go on stage. We couldn't even have the time to work out why it got corrupted. So I emailed home to see if the master file was good. No, it's all blank. Great. So we couldn't even have it sent to us over in a few minutes with email or one of the services. Oh my goodness. So that was like, then what do you do? So I had to sit there for like approximately almost close to 15 hours or something like that, and replace every slide. And of course it had to be the longest section. We've got short sections, we've got long ones. It had to be the longest one, and it had to be the one where the pictures, see, the other sections, the pictures come from just one file. Collectivism is pics come from collectivism folder, right? Or what we have, technology and self-sadism, they come from a specific folder. No, it had to be the one it's from all the folders, so now you got to go into all the folders and check for every individual picture. But we did it.
It's easily the most powerful part of the whole talk, in my opinion. For people that aren't going to get a chance to actually come and see it, what's your thoughts on the solution side of what we're talking about? A lot of people have come to see David's work, etc. And I'd love for them to, even if they can't make it to the event, to hear your thoughts on the solutions. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think they're crucial. I think they're absolutely crucial. That's what the whole talk leads up to. I feel very serious about the state of the world. even in the early parts when we're talking about history and, the past and what have you. And people think, oh, you know so much about history and all. I have to keep reminding them that that's a secondary interest to me. I get interested in all of the stuff I'm interested in purely because I'm interested in the state of decay that's in the world right now. The origins of evil. Why are we living the lives we're living right now? And what can we do about it? I believe we can do something about it, so then all energy must be focused on that. And this solution section is been long in the making. I mean, this has been meditation and assimilation. Because remember, this is an abstract of loads of information I could have gone onto, but I took the best parts from all the philosophy, psychology, conspiracy, all my own previous work, the writings of dozens and dozens of other scholars. I mean, I had to read all their works, not just a piece of their works like label reading. I've read all the works of the people that I mentioned in these things, just to find one quote or one sentiment or to follow up what they're, to basically digest. Remember we spoke even about that fact of Otto Rank and how he updated Freud's Thanatos. I challenge anybody to go and find that information. Find me a description of how Otto Rank, the existential psychologist, updated Freud's Thanatos complex. Over whole institutes have risen and fallen fighting over what Thanatos is. That one little piece of information took, God knows how many months or years to not only understand, volumes and volumes to read, volumes of commentary to read, because you don't understand the original thesis written by the man himself, so now you have to read commentaries on it, and commentaries on the commentaries on it, until you have it completely clear. And that goes for almost every slide. The amount of work and blood that's been put into this solution section primarily is phenomenal, really. And each thing is a condensed nugget that will flower later on in the mind of the person who, thinks back on it or watches the DVD or whatever, and follows up the research. I've mentioned a couple of times during the talk, take names of these people, the Viktor Frankls and take their names, go and look up on the internet what they're into. Because the people who go, that few that come to see us, they're the 100 that teach 1,000. They're the 1,000 that teach 10,000. But when you go out to do that work, you better be armed with the facts. I've got the facts, I've done it all my life. But the individual needs to also arm themselves so they can immediately say, no, you're wrong. Let me prove it to you. Here's the statistics, or here's the facts. And no, that's not incorrect. It's incorrect. Or even with school teachers, and anybody tries to debunk you or pretend that they don't know what you're talking about. It's very, very important that people in this movement are armed up with intelligence more than in any other subject, because they're going to receive more backlashing than others, and they're going to look stupider than anyone else.
Questions.
Right. Look at the way the newspapers pictorialize myself and David and other people. We get more backlashing than ever from the mainstream, isn't it? So we can technically look dumber if we don't own our own stuff. We'll be the butt of ridicule. Well, that is not going to happen with me. I can tell you that. I'm not saying they should stop the ridicule, but there's not going to go very far, because come on ahead, bring it on. I will be able to give you line and verse and chapter and verse of this stuff, and put you right, as many people have done so. Many people have been transformed in their ideas of what they have. They've emailed me going, I had these false ideas about some of the people you're talking about, or I had a false idea about psychology, or I had a false idea about these things. You've really shown me what it really is.
You did that for me as well. We've had conversations about people like William Blake. The information you've explained to me, and it's amazing.
Isn't it?
Can you go into a little bit about the seven universe?
That's coming in another part of the Age of Manipulation series. But Blake was a man who, remember in the last section we started talking about the inner world? He was an expert on that. He was a champion of that. And he, in his work, he was a poet primarily, so his work is a little bit difficult to decode because it's not quite, linear. And then he wrote many books in which they're apparently, his little dramatis persona, his characters, appear to change throughout the books, making it even more complicated. But basically what he did was he characterized aspects of consciousness, like the reason of man, he made into a god called Urizen, right? And the heart, it has a specific deity, and the body, Tharmas, from the word thermal, right? Tharmas is a god, Los is the heart, reverse of the word Sol, and he has Jerusalem, he took from the Bible, but it's not a place, it's a female goddess who's actually going to be responsible at the end days for freeing everyone, bringing people back to spiritual unity, or whatever you want to call it. So, and then Blake had a very elaborate, in his early works, of the fall of man, of how that had actually happened through 4 stages, basically. And strangely, his theories pre-cues Jung. Now, as a matter of fact, for those who are really, really into that subject, Jung borrowed almost everything that he knew from Nietzsche. This is not well known, right? Freud borrowed a lot from Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, but Jung borrowed a lot from Nietzsche, and also apparently, in my opinion, borrowed a hell of a lot from William Blake. Because Blake's descent of spirit from what he referred to as the Edenic realm was in a fourfold way. Just in the same way that you have Jung's quaternity of thinking, feeling, intuition, and the other one, sensation. So God, when he fell, and God's name was Albion, just means the white one, like the white cliffs of Dover, the Albion, England, pure white light. Yeah, he falls very much in a sort of Kabbalistic, stripped down Kabbalistic way, where God falls, smashes himself on the rocks of reality or the material, and splits into 4 parts. Now, you got to be, you're going to have a hard time proving me that Jung didn't just take that right out of Blake. So and these 4 individual parts become separate individuals. And then, strange, another thing happens is that those individuals are all, I think, masculine, if I'm not mistaken, and they divide themselves because the fall is so drastic that they split, and so now you have 8. And when the first 4 split, they split into what's called an emanation, which is a feminine half of their split. So Albion falls, divides into 4. The 4 zoas, from the Greek living being, divide themselves into a feminine half, which is called an emanation. And then I think they can even split again into 16th into what's called a spectre, which is more the shadow side of everyone, you see? Although in Blake always used to turn things around a lot, and it turns out that sometimes the demonic side of us, the spectre side, is actually a liberator, turns out to be a form of liberator. So it's very complex iconography. And so this incredible thing goes on. We have 16 court cards in the tarot. We have 16 emanations from Blake. So there's lots of incredible connotations there. And the man was really basically saying that all of these individual aspects of consciousness, of a singularity, go out and have their myriad experiences in the creation.
In reality.
In reality. And then one day, from some amazing event, the marriage of heaven and hell, when Albion awakes, they come back again and unify. And then even behind those theories that he had, there's even a more fantastic tale. Very esoteric, and we'll be dealing with it's the backbone of one of the future talks. I use his metaphysics, in other words, to back up some of my own theories, to really make it, adamantine. But I'm still working on that, so it'll be down the line at Age of Manipulation 4.
So we've had this particular series of talks now. Obviously we've ruffled up some feathers inside of people. What's next? What's the next talk? I mean, you're going to be coming back next year.
Well, yes, exactly. Just like we said at the very opening of this event, and even the ones before, this Age of Manipulation is a continuation of my entire research into the origins of evil, basically. But that's such a massive concept that one Atlantis book or one talk series is just completely not going to happen to explain it all. You can do a large amount, but there's still always going to be a lot left over, because this is a fascinating Rubik's Cube that has to be turned in multiple directions. You got to go close to the canvas, you got to come back. You have to look at it in a multiplicity of ways because it conceals itself. It's not that easy to understand. And again, as Jung said in Architects of Control, the DVD, we have that clip from Jung, where he talks about the man as the source of all coming evil. Well, it's not so easy to investigate consciousness. We know that consciousness has defenses. Consciousness conceals itself from investigation. The psychologists call it defenses, the ego defenses and what have you. So consciousness is itself quite elusive. And then, wait a minute, isn't it consciousness that's observing consciousness? Well, how does that work? Isn't that like hiring the criminal to seek for himself? So we have some major problems in even uncovering these things, because they're like they're hidden in a very peculiar way, in which the very hand that seeks to grab it pushes the truth further away. Yeah, just like a ball on a water. The more you try to grab at it, the more it goes out of your reach. This thing is programmed to retract from you. The more that the more hungry you get to get it, the more it leads you until you're into a crevasse or something like that. So that means that a very patient progress needs to happen. A lot of returning to roots, a lot of going back, a lot of deconstruction. Remember in the movie Dune, at the end when they're trying to negotiate the serpent, the worm, he tells his mother as they're running across the desert, walk without rhythm. And they do this weird sort of crazy, there's a lot of symbolism in that, by the way. But in order not to alert the worm, right, the negative aspect of the mind, walk without rhythm. You go clump, 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 clump. It's like the sharks listening to your heart. Straight in, dead. So the walking without rhythm is a sort of a Zen Taoist approach, in which when you're approaching the mystery, you kind of become like the joker, the jester. This is very much something that they had in Celtic mythology. In fact, even in Scandinavian mythology, Thor is a double for the jester, as a matter of fact. Even with his, in one persona, he's the big muscle-bound war god, god of terror, terror, right? His name. But he's also in another element, the fool, the jester, who comes into the court in disguise, listens to everything, and heads out as the aged provocateur. So in life we have to adopt many, many guises, you see. And the same thing is adopted in the journey towards knowledge. Now in the next, then we're going to have to look at it again. In Psychic Vampirism and the Age of Manipulation 3, we got to revisit the whole thing again.
This is amazing knowledge for anyone to learn when they get to a certain part of their journey. I think that knowing this intellectual side of things is incredibly important. At what point would you say are people ready to start living this as their truth? You know, is that really what we're all moving towards? Is actually embodying this on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, different for different people, because different people register just like when you diet. You know, some people have a fast metabolism, some have a slow. For some people, this can take years to percolate down. For others, it's instantaneous, and you can see it in their faces. For others, it's like, where's the door? I'm in the wrong place. Right? This is not what I wanted to hear. So it's all, I'm not a collectivist, so I don't really believe in collective action.
Yes.
But what I do believe is in empowerment psychologically. Because remember, see, no matter whatever vagary happens to you in the external world, no matter whatever happens even in your personal life, it's tragic, or even in the society, if you have the psychic constitution to be strong and understanding why these are happening, you'll sail through anything. But whereas the person who is weak and ungrounded, the slightest thing can happen and they're neurotic. They fall over, topple. So I would rather see a group of people who can withstand even quite large tragedy or meltdown, but do so because they're not fazed by it. All down through time, you see that the slightest tragedies, apparently very strong people collapse, because they're only strong as long as they're running around with the apparent image of being successful or whatever, or owning a lot of things. You see, but when the real meltdown comes, they're ready to blow their brains out. History has shown this. And it's the quiet little man who never said a word, you know, who turns out to be the leader and says, look, I'll lead you all to safety. You know. There's fantastic anecdotes of this all down through time.
As Khalil Gibran talks about when he talks about freedom, he says, you know, freedom is not just not having any worries, but it's having worries, but being able to rise above them unencumbered.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that quote, and he was one of my great teachers as well. So I would say that that's the way it is, and if you can just do that, if you can just lead people to remember that their power is within, not without, the work is accomplished. But then on a technical basis, you know, I've got a lot to say about the origins of evil. I think I've got a lot of information that needs to be shared, so...
People need to hear it from that space. Yeah. You know, they might have a teacher that can teach it from more of a living now space, but I think the way you explain it in the intellectual terms is also, it's just like a lot of people have said that you coming out after David is actually very perfect, a perfect fit, because in a lot of ways it encapsulates, it completes a certain part of the puzzle for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a good compliment. And since I wrote the Atlantis book, and then 10 years ago I said that in the space of 10 years we will know the origins of who we are. We already do. It's already there. People just go to my forum to prove that. We absolutely know the key things about who and what we are. And we certainly, and what that really means is we know all the lies that have been told that we're not. But the process then says, now that we've come up to that stage, now we need the advanced class to say, now that we're clear on the vast majority of the lies and we can throw them away, we don't need to think about them anymore, we still have certain mysteries that we now need, that mankind has never gone into before, at least not for many millennia. And that's the road that I see ahead. Is that the rest of this work has been basically, should have been done a long time ago. Where the human race has come is like, okay, it's great and everything, but you know, that's just to understand how programmed you've been. Now we've got that far, don't think that's the end. Now you have to do the initial work.
People think they've waken up from knowing that 9/11's an inside job. It's like,
that's it. There's more to do. Now you have to take the next step and find out what you're really all about. Now that you can get rid of the false religion and the false, all of this other falsity, that still leaves a void of what to go into. What do I believe? Where do I go? What do I know?
What do I eat?
Yeah. Remember the very first thing we said at the beginning of this talk is, who are we going to be in 1 or 2 or 10 years? Are we going to even be the same beings? Is the human race ready for such a major change that we may not even be the same people we are right now? You see? So in psychic vampirism, then we bring it, but then we go into another level, more dark, more specific, looking at how man enslaves himself and how he intends to enslave others. Because if you want to undo the big knot up there, there's a whole bunch of little knots down here that need to be undone first before you can unravel the greater Gordian knot above. This is just the facts. This is just the way it is. And untying those knots on the personal life from within, all the people who've enslaved you, all the damage that they've done to your psyche and your physicality and your body and your mind, all of that needs to be purged and healed. And you can't purge and heal it until you first know how it's done. And so the psychic vampirism is now a deep look at how people mentally and sexually and subliminally enslave one another, you see. So that a person can go in there and waking up, because they're numb. These things are numb. You know, our interrelationships with other people are fraught with so much facade and camouflage, and so evil people are able to just walk amidst us. Very immoral, sick, deeply disturbed, self-sadistic individuals are able to gain great power. That's why the world is in the way it is, because we let them go up the ladder, or they know, being conscienceless, without conscience, can ascend. Even the fraternities, I've said so many times, those are reverse percolators. Those are reverse filters for scum to reach the top. Usually you have a filter that filters that out. The fraternities, starting from school through the masonry and all of that, is to make sure that the good man is filtered out, so he has no power, and only the sickest people get the reins of power. But that also happens in a daily situation as well, where children are born and people are let loose. Now, these hedonistic ones that we dealt with in the very last part of this talk. So we need to clean up that house first and get completely savvy, as I've said dozens of times, about every conceivable facet of evil. Get the discernment to know what it is so that you can remove it, so that it has no power and it dries up of its own accord. If you try to fight evil with the weapons it's handed you, forget it. You'll just go round and round in circles and only empower it. It gets stronger, like the movie The Fifth Planet. Well, the more you shoot at this thing, the bigger it gets. You have to emaciate it. You have to take away its food, break the entrainment, and then the thing withers up and crumbles. That's the true art of conquering evil, you see.
It reminds me of The Matrix, where when Neo wakes up, he comes into the real world, which is kind of real consciousness. We find that the robot comes and looks at him, and it goes away. It doesn't try and attack him, train him, doesn't try and put him back in his pod.
Yeah.
It knows that it's the source, the power that he was giving to it is completely gone.
It's completely gone, and he's almost become invisible. He's become a ghost in a positive way. He's no longer part of the whole game. And that's what I mean about the person who becomes light. Traveling light in their consciousness, you see, is the true enlightenment. And that can come. And even if a few people only get it, that's all right, because those few go on and teach the others. There's no necessity for everyone to sort of get it at the same time in this somewhat ludicrous way that has been described a lot in the New Age movement. No, a few people get it, they have the power to then go on and disseminate it. Because the truth is the one doing the disseminating. The truth has its own action, its own movement, and it's coming into your life regardless of the walls that you put up. You can put as many sandbags, and you can put as many concrete walls as you want, and you can lock it out and block it out, and there it will be. Because the truth is eternal, the truth is in the breath you breathe, it's in the cells of your body, it cannot be destroyed. So the quicker that you go with it and open up and just throw the oars away and go where the river wants to take you, like the Hopi suggested, so be it. And the better and the faster and the more happy you'll be. Or you'll be dragged down to the riverbank, punched stupid, have your head beat off all the walls of the universe, and then thrown into the water.
Yeah.
But one way or the other, you're going in. You're going with the flow, you know.
On that note, Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure having you
here.
here.
Thanks for bringing me.
Look forward to seeing you again
next year.
Thank you very much, my friend.
Yeah, appreciate it.